Greetings, and welcome back to the 31 Nights of Frights. Before we start today's video, I just want to let you guys know that Arrow Video have just started their 𝙎𝙬𝙊𝙀 sale. In this sale, you can get up to 50% off Blu-rays, 4Ks, and limited edition releases. On top of that, I also have my own discount code, �REALHORROR, that if you guys use at the checkout, you'll get an additional 10% off your order. The discount code can be used on all products on the site, besides pre-orders, but it can also be used on discounted items in the sale. There'll be a link in the description of this video so you can head over to the Arrow store, take a look at all the amazing releases that Arrow have on offer, and then use the discount code to save yourself some cash. And just to let you guys know, the 𝙎𝙬𝙊𝙀 sale lasts all month. Anyway, onto the video. In the last episode, we entered the 1970s, and we talked about the exploitation films that began to appear due to the relaxation of censorship and an influx of independent filmmakers. Additionally, America was going through a difficult time in its history, and this led to the rise of social political horror movies that reflected both the state of the country and its society. This marked the start of the horror renaissance, and one of the greatest movies to come out of this era was Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A film that was low budget, raw, controversial, and had a lot to say. Tobe Hooper attacked the political climate at the time and showed the degradation of the traditional American family and its values. Whereas Hooper scared the audience with a depraved cannibalistic family and a chainsaw-wielding madman who wears human faces as a mask, director William Friedkin would make a film that terrified and shocked audiences by attacking the country's innocence, presenting horror in the form of a young girl. This movie is still considered by many to be the scariest film ever made, and of course I'm talking about 1973's The Exorcist. Based on the book written by William Peter Blatty, The Exorcist is a film that essentially tells the story of a young girl called Regan, played here in a legendary performance by Linda Blair, who is possessed by the devil, and it's up to the priests Father Merrin, played by Max von Sydow, and Father Karaz, played by Jason Miller, who is having battles with his own faith to save Regan from this evil. Now before we continue, I do realise that I've f***ed up a little bit here. Obviously, I'm doing this series in chronological order to cover the entire history of the horror genre, and in terms of movie release dates, this episode should have come before the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but what can you do? Anyway, I honestly don't know where to really begin with this film. There is a million things you can talk about when it comes to The Exorcist. It made a huge cultural impact and is one of the most highly regarded and highly analysed movies in history, certainly in horror history. In fact, The Exorcist was the first horror film to be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, and it was also nominated in various other categories too. I'm not so sure how common it is for a film that is so controversial to receive such critical acclaim at its time of release, but The Exorcist did it. The Exorcist was unleashed onto the world in 1973. In fact, it actually came out a day after Christmas. The idea of that just completely cracks me up. Who would have thought that The Exorcist is a Christmas movie? Upon its release, The Exorcist became instantly infamous. The film caused a lot of controversy, and it also resulted in mass hysteria. It's well documented that a lot of cinema goers would faint or vomit while watching the film, and some people just straight up couldn't finish it and have to leave the cinema. In a very similar vein to Psycho, there were massive lines that wrapped around the theatres with people trying to watch this movie. It was essentially Exorcist mania, and if you haven't seen it already, you should definitely check out the footage of this. Due to its infamy, the controversies that surround the film, and its overall impact and lasting legacy, The Exorcist is usually given the title of the scariest movie ever made, and obviously that is quite the statement. You have to really look at this from the point of view that in 1973 there was nothing like The Exorcist. This film shook America and the rest of the world too. But with perspective and the fact that The Exorcist is turning 50 years old this year, no, it's probably not the scariest movie ever made. For starters, fear is a very subjective matter. Everybody is scared of different things, and obviously the 50 years have taken a toll on this film. Personally, I don't think it's aged at all, especially in terms of its groundbreaking and incredibly highly effective visual effects. What I mean is, a lot of films copied The Exorcist, and still do, and now we have a plethora of these possession movies, most of which are absolute shite, and naturally people are more desensitized now. But keep in mind the era that this film was released in. As I mentioned earlier, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre attacked the degradation of the traditional American family and its values. The Exorcist attacked America's innocence. And despite this film being 50 years old, it involves scenes that will definitely still shock people today, and probably forever. The director, William Friedkin, who sadly left us this year, always said that he didn't see The Exorcist as a horror movie, and I fully understand what he means by this. Because The Exorcist isn't your typical horror film, and I think that's the problem when modern audiences see this film and have such high expectations because of its legacy as being the scariest movie ever made. Most of the movie actually plays out like a drama and slowly builds up to the final exorcism sequence. The movie can be quite subtle, but that's until it's not subtle at all and goes completely balls to the wall horror. And that's why I would say that 50 years later, The Exorcist definitely has not lost any of its impact. There are scenes in this film that caused a lot of controversy when it first came out, specifically that scene involving the crucifix, which I'm actually not going to risk including footage of in this video, as I don't want to run that risk of my video being taken down. But my point is, the more subtle and slow aspects of The Exorcist really make the more intense and scary parts of the film pay off big time. But make no mistake, this film is as much about a priest battling with his loss of faith as it is about a girl being possessed by the devil. Throughout the film, Damien Chazelle, played by Jason Miller in a spectacular performance, grapples with his wavering belief in God. His faith and belief in a benign higher power is further dented as he deals with the grief and regret that looms over him after the passing of his dying mother. This is something that the demon possessing Regan would later use as a weapon to attack Chazelle's faith. In fact, it's this in particular that provides us with what I think is the most unsettling shot in the entire movie, as the demon takes the form of Chazelle's mother during the exorcism sequence. Additionally, Chazelle doubts the forces of the supernatural. We see this in the scene when he first comes face to face with the demon. Chazelle embodies the struggles faced by individuals who are torn between faith and their reason. I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to, and The Exorcist is a film that really makes you think. In the film, the demon possesses a young girl, the face of innocence. How could a benign, all-loving God allow such a thing to happen? The world is plagued with war, famine, disease, and those are just a few reasons why people find it so hard and struggle with faith. In the film's finale, Chazelle makes the ultimate Christ-like sacrifice by inviting the demon to possess him before throwing himself out of a window and ending his own life in the process to save young Regan. This ending leaves many people confused. Even William Friedkin himself said that he doesn't fully understand it. The main reason for this is because suicide is a sin, and therefore there may be a rather bleak afterlife ahead for Chazelle. But I personally believe that this is essentially a symbol of good conquering evil, and also Chazelle's redemption, as he reunites with his faith and is read his last rites as he lies dying. Like I said at the start of this video, this is a movie that has been analysed to death, and I've just barely scraped the surface with it. But one thing I do highly recommend watching if you haven't seen it already is the documentary Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist. It's an extremely interesting watch, and it's basically William Friedkin exploring his own movie. During the documentary, Friedkin explains aspects of the film's development and production, as well as its underlying themes, with many anecdotes on the way. One of the many interesting facts about The Exorcist is that composer Bernard Herrmann, who wrote the music for Psycho, actually wrote a score for The Exorcist, which Friedkin was initially excited about, but he he ended up actually really hating the score that Herman wrote, but of course the iconic sound of Mike Oldfield's tubular bells would become the theme for The Exorcist. The Exorcist is also considered to be a cursed movie, as many strange things occur during and after the film's production. This includes the premature deaths of many people involved with the making of the film, and also the set of the McNeil house actually burning down at one point. There's actually a show on Shudder called Cursed Films, and there's a whole episode dedicated to The Exorcist, so I recommend checking that out too. So 50 years after its release, is The Exorcist the scariest film ever made? Probably not. But the fact that the film is still held in such a high regard is just a testament to its legacy. It's no argument that this film remains to be impactful decades later, and its influence over horror and cinema in general could not be overstated. In some ways, I think that its legacy as the scariest movie ever made somewhat damages the film. People often expect something different the first time they see this movie, and therefore they end up being disappointed, which is a massive shame. This is a film that carries an incredible story that deals with the subject of faith. Everyone takes something different away from it, and depending on your view of the world, your own personal faith and beliefs, and your overall outlook on life, the film can make you think and feel in many different ways. But one thing is for sure, The Exorcist is a timeless classic and one of the greatest movies ever made. So what do you guys think of The Exorcist? Do you think it still holds up 50 years later? And do you think it still deserves the title as the scariest movie ever made? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to join me in tomorrow's episode. We'll be taking a look at the first ever big summer blockbuster movie that also won the title of the highest grossing film ever at the time. It was also an early work from a man by the name of Steven Spielberg. I'll see you there.